Next podcast with Chris and Todd.
All right. Well, hey, welcome back. We are just working on the next podcast, trying to bring you some ideas, some thoughts that hopefully are challenging and encouraging in your life. And this is no exception. So if you find these helpful, if you find these topics that you're like, hey, I think somebody
smash the like button. No, I've always wanted to say that, but it's but
let somebody know. Share
there
it.
you go. That's probably better.
Forward that link onto a friend so they can smash the like button.
Smash that like button.
Yeah.
I don't think it does anything.
I don't even think we have a like button. I don't
think so either.
Yeah, Milton's like, you know what? Nobody's going to like this. You know, no, I'm just kidding. No, but
we do have the thumbs down button. We do have that.
That's right. That's the only one Milton put on there. Like, it's like big one in the corner. Like, anyway, so it's perfect. We're talking about grace, how to live in grace and how to grow in grace and how to, man, sometimes wrestling with grace is, man, we could go a lot of angles on this, but grace really is one of those catalytic words that I believe has to be a part of the way in which we live. And if it's not, man, like a key ingredient in a recipe, it really is going to derail a lot of the things that take place in your life.
I think it's what God and Jesus kind of refers to of show the world through the love that you have for each other.
Yeah.
And so it's like we've got to be different in this. And this is how we are different because a lot of our world doesn't want to give grace.
No. Or they have such a high expectation of how they would respond in certain things. And that, it's so dangerous.
So learning to live in it is not always easy because I think it's grace is a complicated thing. It's awesome. It's a great gift we get, but it's complicated to fully understand and wrap your mind around. It is
because I think part of it is you have to answer the question about grace in your own life. Like you've been shown grace each and every day, right? And so sometimes people wrestle with even giving themselves grace, and they struggle with the ability to live or to move forward, and it derails conversations, it derails friendships, it derails marriages, and just even and just all those different things. So how did you learn and grow to begin to understand experiencing grace? Was there a time in your life that you saw grace at work and you're like, oh, that's making sense now, or just you began to understand it in a new way, in a different light?
I think for the longest time, I grew up in church and heard about grace a lot, but I always took it as conditional, like as in, I'll give you grace as long as you do these things.
Sure.
And so even when it came to God, it was like, all right, I died for you, but you need to choose me, and then you need to live a really good life. And so initially that messed with me, that grace. It was kind of the learning component. So I remember at 12, like, man, if God died for me in that, and watching some videos that were showcasing that, and I was like, man, that's powerful. So then it became, well, then I must live my life
sure
a certain way
in
order for that grace to mean something.
Yeah.
And so, and I don't think God was or anybody was teaching me. I just in my brain made it conditional.
Yeah.
Because I just see that's how the world works. Like, I'll give you grace as long as you do this, but if you don't do this, then boom, it's not going to work. And so then it came to those moments, especially became as an adult, where I was like, wait, I can't fix it.
Yeah.
Like I can't be good enough to earn that grace. I can't win you over. Because in my I mean, for the longest time, even in relationships, I'd always play it in like, okay, they did something nice, I need to do something nice. So it was always like a keep it fair.
Yeah.
So that's where the condition.
That's exhausting, isn't it?
That's the conditional component. And then fell in love with Tina, and she wrecked that for me because she was very like gift giving.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've shared this. I think I've shared this story, but maybe I haven't. But like, I remember there was one point she'd given me like a lot of gifts, just being kind, and I was like, man, I'm okay. In the ledger here, I'm way behind.
Yeah.
Like, here's Tina, here's me, and I'm way behind. So I was like, man, okay, I've got to do some things. But once again, she beat me to it.
Yeah.
And she's like, hey, and we were like, it was in college, finals were about ready to happen. We're wrapping up, and I was a little stressed. And she's like, hey, after you get done, let's go, go to Steak and Shake. And I was like, at the time, I should have just said, that's very kind.
Yeah.
But in my dumb brain, I went, stop it. Like, and I literally said the words out loud.
And I could see Tina's face now, just like, what did you just say?
And we're in, like, with our friends, coffee shop, and I'm just like, Tina, just stop being so nice. Like, stop it. To this day, I still cringe telling this story because I'm like, oh, I was such an idiot. But I would say that's how I understood grace.
Yeah.
And so when somebody did more, or when God did more than I could really understand, I was like, you're blowing up this concept of how I think the world works.
Yeah.
And so eventually getting to a spot to where I was like, I can't fix this. And that's where I think grace will wreck you. If you get to a point of understanding grace that God is giving you, this gift that you can't earn, you can't make right, you can't or like, even if you're prideful enough, like, oh, I feel like I deserve it. Like, no. There's none of that. And God goes, I'm simply giving this. Will you accept it? And I think the hardest thing is learning to actually accept it.
No, I would agree. So when you drive by, this is a side note. When you drive by Steak and Shake now, like, hey, Tina, want to go to Steak and Shake? I'm in.
We probably would still go there. Maybe. I don't know.
Todd, you lost it. Yeah. No more Steak and Shake for you. No. I'm going to go back. Like, I appreciate you sharing those things. Mine was like, and it just popped in my mind, like this reminder, like Joanne Jenkins. She's like, I think she's like 94 now. She's still kicking butt. She's awesome. She might be older than that. Anyway, in fourth grade, I went through a season of life where I made some poor decisions, like with hanging out with some friends and some guys.
Fourth grade, huh?
Fourth grade.
Man.
I was making some decisions that were contrary to what I knew was right. And be in places doing things that I shouldn't have been doing. And I remember one night, my mom and dad said no to Ghostbusters. Like, listen, now you look at Ghostbusters and say that's the corniest thing, but back in the day, it was no. And I said, well, Jared Sharp's mom is taking us to the movie. He's going to pick us up and take us home. And mom and dad will be none the wiser because I'll be at the birthday party. So Deceptive Chris was like, hey, that could work. Well, Jared's mom didn't come pick us up. And I didn't want to walk and now I look back and I'm like, well, crap, it was only like a mile and a half. But in fourth grade, I was like, oh man. But I knew down the end of the street was Joanne Jenkins that lived above the cafe that they ran. And I was like, I could go to Joanne's house and I could call my mom and dad and they could come get me. And I was like, but will she open the door and what will she think? And she opened that door and said, Chris, come up. And we talked and she's like, what's going on, Chris? And I explained and she's like, oh, and Joanne was not none the wiser. She was just so even keel. Like, and I thought this is going to change the way Joanne looks at me. And she,
because you told her everything, huh?
I did. I was like, listen, this is what happened. And I pretty much lied to mom and dad. And I was like one of those kids that I was willing to spill stuff, like, cause I was an approval seeker as a kid and I wanted that. And I shared with Joanne and Joanne never changed, never missed a beat. She was just the most consistent individual, one of the most consistent individuals in my mom and dad's church that loved me. And just, even though I had made a really stupid decision and it wasn't bad, but I lied to mom and dad, and mom and dad, eventually showed grace after I spent 2 weeks in, being grounded. but Joanne showed just such immense love and continued to be that person that I even look at now and go, man, she's just an amazing woman. Yeah. And that's where grace began to like come alive. Like, oh man, she was just so gracious to me. Let me in her house. It was like 9:30 at night, and she wasn't.
So you went and saw the movie.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I went to Ghostbusters. Felt guilty the whole time. Yeah. And here's the even made it
so
worse.
It was more about getting back home.
Yeah, getting home.
Got it.
And yeah, I should have felt worse about the movie. But what made it worse is I sat in the back and watched some of the guys that I went with throw Skittles at the screen, and I'm like, well, man, if we get busted for that, then I'm not going to be around that, But anyway, yeah. Grace is one of those things where I really saw was fortunate enough to experience enough people in my life that showed me grace and said, you're just a pastor's kid, and and we don't have any expectations of you. Like, and I don't mean it that way, but we love you even when you mess up.
I would say healthy expectations.
Yeah, healthy expectations, and people that,
because there's a lot of unhealthy expectations.
There are. Oh wow. And so that was like the beginning of like really understanding grace in such a cool way, because that was a pivotal time in my life where I could have just continued to hang out with that crew and gone down that way and realize that, man, people are going to love me and support me in that way, that I want that.
Mm-hmm.
I want what she's showing me right now, and I want to show people that. So, yeah.
I think once you experience that, you're like, oh man, like this is powerful. This is life-changing. I don't deserve this. But for you personally, you're like, okay, I'm starting to get the grace. I actually think where sometimes grace gets challenged is going, now, if we're going to talk about living in it.
Yes.
Going, what about those moments that someone who you think should have been better let you down, or circumstances happen in life, and you're looking at God going, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
I think I've seen, and you and I have done enough counseling to where that grace just disappears, shrivels up.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I'd be curious to ask you, like, why do you think that happens in people's lives? Because I mean, I've experienced it too, but why do we go, when it's painful, we go, maybe that grace thing was not real?
That's a good question, and I think it's so vital to remember. As we get embarrassed, I think that, to me, that's, we have expectations and all those different things that just kind of sneak in there, and the enemy does a good job of, you're not who you say you are, and you want to shrivel up and die, or you want to not be a part. That's so tough. And one of the things, like you mentioned, that like, why does grace disappear and shrivel up? Like, we forget that we make mistakes too. Like, and I yell at my kid early on, like, I can't believe you spilled that milk. Okay, hold on. When's the last time you spilled milk? Oh, that was last week at the restaurant. Remember, you spilled it on the people that you went to supper with. And our memory is so short, in those moments of forgetting to experience. But I think it is. We have expectations, we have thoughts, we have embarrassing moments where that's where it shrivels up. At least for me, like, I'm embarrassed that, oh man, I forgot that I was showing grace, or I forgot that this is life. It happens. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. I think ultimately we forget we're loved.
Yeah.
And so, that's what grace teaches us. We're loved even when we shouldn't be.
Yeah.
But then when someone hurts us, it makes us question that. Like, am I really loved though?
Yeah.
Like, because man, that person did something pretty painful to me. And so then you see a person respond more out of, I think Jesus did an incredible job of sharing like the prodigal son story.
Yeah.
And many of us can become the older brother.
Mm-hmm.
We're still getting the grace of an inheritance.
Yeah.
But yet the older brother's frustrated, like, man, you're throwing this major party for this. He doesn't even call him brother, but this son of yours.
Yeah, I know.
That he doesn't deserve to be in our family anymore. Yeah, and pretty much like, he doesn't deserve it. And I think it's unfair. You're doing this for him, and I've done all of this for you. I don't get anything.
Mm-hmm. Forgetting that everything was at the Father's disposal was already there from the whole time.
Correct.
Right? And man, how we develop such a tunnel vision when it comes to grace, right? This, like, this is all out here. God says that my grace is sufficient for you, right? Like, and well, hold on, like, if this is my case, I forget the sufficiency of everything that could support me in having a better mindset or reacting differently.
I think we forget we're loved, or we compartmentalize it.
Mm-hmm.
No, grace is for that part of my life, but not for this part of it.
Or grace is for that person or these people that I love, and not
for these people.
Not for these people.
And so I go, that's where I think if we're going to live in grace, we've got to really battle either forgetting or compartmentalizing it.
Yeah, because our inability to live in grace is going to expose us.
Absolutely. I think it's the one thing that actually causes people to look at Christians and go, wait, aren't you supposed to be?
Yeah.
Now, and hear me, when I'm talking about grace, this does not mean that we just, hey, all the rules that God says, we love you. It's not affirming everything. It's not saying that the truth
absolutely.
is nothing. But do we truly have grace
Yeah.
for the people who go, I totally disagree with you.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I like you.
Yeah.
Kind of deal. Do we have grace for the moments that we disagree with God? I don't like how this is going.
Yeah.
I don't agree with this. I don't feel like I should have to deal with this.
Yeah.
And going, what? But we got to go back to, do I remember what he did for me? Yeah. And this is not just for me, it's for others too.
Well, and that's just it. It's not on grace is great. We love when grace is given to us, but like, how do we respond and push ourselves through to those moments where we wait for somebody else to show us grace, and God's like, no, I need you to make that first move. I need you to show grace, and getting out of our own way and allowing him to fill us to show grace, to live in grace, receiving that grace and being reminded like what was done for us and how now shall we live if that has affected us. Mm-hmm. And granted, there are challenges that come our way, seeing other people get it, seeing other people at work well, how come I'm not showing that? I think you just said that, a second ago. So how do we allow ourselves to get out of the way to allow grace to really affect us? If it is a roadblock for us, what's something we need to do to get out of the way of that?
I know this is not like a tangible thing, but I would say keep allowing grace to wreck you.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that's a vulnerable
yeah, it's vulnerable. It's not easy.
No.
Because I remember there was a moment in my life where I thought God was being very unfair.
Yeah.
Like, it was a job situation, and I thought, man, I feel like I got moved into a different role without having the ability to really choose, or and I know you've walked through that too. Yeah. And it just felt like, and of course, in our world, we get told we just feel like this is what God wants,
Yeah.
and we're like, cool, like. And so that's where you get mad at God,
mm-hmm.
and you're like, God, what did I do?
Yeah.
Did I do something wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And I think God's like, do you still believe in my grace that maybe this is the best thing for you?
Yeah.
Like maybe this could be okay. And he's like, and some of it, I don't think he ever wanted us to experience hurt. And this is gonna be careful. Like some of these moments, like you see the like, oh, this is good. Some of them are just straight down sinful, and God never wanted that to happen.
No, I agree.
But there's also God's going, okay, but I died for that.
Yeah.
This doesn't have to define you anymore. So I would say if you keep letting grace wreck you, that means grace has become part of, if not, your identity. I'm a child of God because of the grace God has given me. I have that identity. So when the identity goes, I feel like I deserve that job, or I feel like I deserve that relationship, or I don't feel like I should have to deal with that. Those can start to become I am statements that are identity statements that you have to be like, whoa. No, that's not who I am.
Yeah.
It's shaping me.
Yeah.
But it's not my identity.
Well, and I think we so often shy away from those wrecking moments, right? And those can be some of those powerful moments that we have in our lives.
Right.
It would be interesting, to like Paul Harvey, like, and here's the rest of the story. Like, where's the rest of the story for the older brother? Did he just live the rest of his life in this bitter state of a lack of grace for his brother? And did that ruin any future relationship they had together? And we hope not, right? Mm-hmm. But yet so many times we don't take a moment to see on the other side of this. Like, what is the other side of me not showing grace to that person? What's the other side? But yet then we live in the misery of that decision. This idea of like, well, I'm not going to show them grace. And then, it's okay. This is a weird scenario, but I think it plays out. So work with me for a second. I am a big fan of burgers and toasting the bun. If you're not going to toast the bun, I think you're doing a disservice to the burger. So I'm teaching my daughters, you're going to love a toasted bun. Love it. It's going to be great. So Taylor is like, nope, just the burger. I just want the burger and cheese. Let's go. Don't give me a bun. And I don't want to waste it. The other day, this idea of like experiencing grace in a new way. Dad, how did I ever go so long without a toasted bun? And I was like, oh, the heavens opened.
Yeah.
And I think that, to me, that's the beauty of like when we begin to understand what grace can do in our lives, we begin to see the benefit of really allowing God to wreck us, because we run away from it. We block against being wrecked because we look vulnerable, we look weak, we look like we're a pushover, and we assume that if people see that, they're going to, again, take advantage of us. Mm-hmm. But if we can live in that surrender of grace to God, of God, my life, I'm just laying it before you. And it's already before him, right? Like, and so this idea of wrecking is so tough, but it's so necessary, because it puts you at a place where God can begin to say, okay, now that you see me and get to see yourself as I see you, then now I need you to do that for other people. Mm-hmm. And showing grace to people may wreck us, but man, the things that can come out of that, the things that can blossom out of grace, and because you and I both have experienced grace in such powerful ways.
Not saying it has to, well, and I would say on some levels it probably does. The wrecking that happens in your life, think of it this way. If anything's going to get healthy and grow, you go,
it has to die first.
It has to die first. Or it's just it's a tough, ugly situation. I mean, you think about planting something.
Yeah. Yep.
You rip up the ground and you put all the seed, and the seed has to go under before it can come up. And so that's part of it. You think about even bringing animals, bringing babies into this world, humans being it's a pretty that's a suffering process. Those kind of things.
I didn't know where you're going with that. I'm like, kids, we're gonna have a special talk right now. No.
But it's just like, it's one of those things where I think it's hard, but it's beautiful all at the same time.
Yep, absolutely.
And so I think in that, and it's not that, I want to be careful with this, because sometimes theology goes, well, that's just the world, and and it's like, God didn't design that. He designed paradise at first, but when sin entered, God says, so this will be part of it.
Yeah, that suffering.
Suffering will be part of it, but in the midst of that suffering, there will be good things that come out of it, and that we can always have hope, and we can always. So that's a part of when we're facing pain, wherever that pain is coming from. Are we going to let the pain define us, or are we going to go back to no grace defines me?
Yeah.
So that is ultimately the challenge, and is if we're going to live by grace, those painful moments, because if we choose grace and work through it, and see the other side, walk through the dark valley, as Psalms 23 says, and we won't fear any evil, then we get to this other side of going, man, wow, God's good.
Yeah, because we all know people, like you say, that show us that grace, and how powerful that is, that when even sometimes in the midst of conversation, and you're like, oh, wow, that was amazing. That was really cool.
That was profound. Yeah. And so I look back at the things that I've gone through. I mean, I've dealt with tragedy of losing close friends. I've dealt with just sometimes, whether it's just life stuff or work stuff that you're like, I did not see this coming, or the difficulty within relationships. And I go, I don't want to relive it, but I also don't know if I would change it because of what I learned in the midst of it.
Yep.
Now, don't get me wrong. I would love for the people who have passed away to come back, but I also hold on to that hope I will see them again, because a lot of them, I believe, were Christians. And so those are things I was like, wait, I still hold on to this grace that God's got this.
Yeah.
And because I think sometimes the hardest part in grace is like believing God's in control when you don't like what he's doing. like this
so true.
This does not make sense.
No.
And I go, in a relationship, God's going to do things that you may disagree with. And are you okay with that?
Yeah.
That's where you learn to go, I believe in him. I trust him. And I'm going to give him the grace. I'm going to believe the best about him in these moments.
Yeah.
Because he's going, I see 20 steps ahead of you.
Oh, yeah.
You trust that I see 20 steps ahead of you.
Yeah, it is. It's that 30,000-foot view versus the 3-foot view that's right in front of you, right? And like God's like, oh, I see this playing out.
And God even goes, even if you think you can't take a step, I'll carry you.
Yeah.
But just trust me in this.
And all of us, I mean, you ever heard that phrase like, oh, that's just like so-and-so. You know, like, and to me, that's what I think what is challenging to me, like, and I want to get there even more and more. Like, isn't that just like God?
Yeah.
Isn't that just like God to do that? Isn't that just like, you know, I'll be honest, I don't know, like, I'll just keep it vague. We had a conversation in our group the other night, and God is doing something in this guy's life and in his family. And I just want to step back and go, isn't that just like God? And granted, sometimes it doesn't work like that, because there could have been somebody in the group last night that said, well, why didn't God do it that way for me? Well, hold on. Sometimes it takes us a place to get there. Sometimes God has to work on that other person, all these different things. But all in all, I want to sit back and go, man, isn't that just like God to just blow the doors off that, or just show up in the way that he does? And it's so cool. I want my deflections to go right to, man, that's the God that I love and I know. And even when it doesn't make sense, can I do that? Well,
and when you do that, the maturing process that starts to happen,
Mm-hmm.
your depths of relationship with God growing.
Yep.
Man, there's so much power that comes out of it, but you got to be willing to face it and go, God, I need your help, leaning on grace and living out grace that you've given me, instead of letting these other identities try to take over. So
yeah, that's good. Man, I would encourage you, if there are areas where you are really struggling with giving grace, what needs to take place? Are there conversations that need to happen? Are there moments you need to get alone with God and say, God, you show me this grace? If you've never experienced the grace of God, man, I want to encourage you to tap into that and to have a conversation with him. But are there relationships that need to be mended because you're refusing to show grace?
And even your relationship with yourself, sometimes that's the toughest one to give grace towards.
Yeah, it is.
Like, who you see in the mirror, are you giving them grace?
Yeah.
Because I go, if you can't give yourself grace, I go, I bet you're struggling to understand God's grace.
Yeah. And you can believe it or not, but God sees you in such an amazing way of that. Pastor Todd referenced the prodigal son, of God running. The Father is a representation of running to us when we've been away and we've been astray, and putting the ring on our finger and putting new shoes on our feet, and just loving us with an unbelievable love that shows us grace no matter where we've been, no matter what we've done. And that's how he sees you, is when you come to him. I love you, and I've always loved you. And so begin to see yourself. I know easier said than done, but I pray that you begin to see yourself in a way of God loving you, such a powerful love and grace-filled love. And so, yeah.
That's good.
Hey, you guys are awesome. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.